Hello and welcome to today's Liverpool.com morning stream. I'm Addison Andrew Beasley is alongside me for the next 10 minutes or so. We're going to talk through a couple of Liverpool topics. If you are watching along live, do feel free to stick any comments in and we'll have a little chat about those as well as we go along. But let's start with a little bit of a chat around Virgil van Dijk, Andrew. There's been a couple of different quotes from Sami Hyypia that have emerged over the last couple of days. I think he's been speaking in a couple of places about him, and to be fair, he's backing him to be the best in the league again. I think it's fair to say there was a little bit of a decline last season. I noticed actually in Jamie Carragher's column recently, I think it was last week, he kind of said that it was a little bit overblown maybe how much Van Dijk had declined. He was certainly excellent over the weekend, but where do you sort of stand on him at the moment? I'd still say personally he's still the best defender in the league. I don't think that has changed, but he's maybe just not quite as good as what he once was at his absolute best. Would that be a fair assessment, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I think, both things can be true. He can still be the best in the league, or certainly one of them, without being quite at the level he was sort of 3 or 4 years ago. We sort of underestimate that, he had that terrible injury in 2021 season. He then comes back and plays pretty much every game as Liverpool do a quadruple bid. I mean, the toll that must have taken, it will have been immense. And something else I've been thinking about as well recently is sort of, would peak Van Dijk have looked less good playing for Liverpool last season? He probably would have, because the structure wasn't there in front of him, or it wasn't working as well as it once did. And similarly, last season's version of Van Dijk might have looked better in the sort of team of Liverpool sort of 2018 to 2020, when the midfield was working brilliantly and everybody was working really hard and stuff like that. So we often talk about how a player is doing and stuff like this, but none of this stuff sort of happens in isolation. And now that Liverpool seem to have got their midfield sorted, or certainly a lot better than it was last season, it's probably no surprise that he and the other defenders look better, because everything's just working better and it makes their jobs easier. I think, as I say, I think he's definitely going to be one of the best in the league, even if he's not at the ultimate peak he was a few years ago.
I think there is a bit of a conversation approaching around a new contract. I'm sure that will happen at some point. He's obviously Liverpool captain now because of Henderson's exit over the summer, so it kind of feels like that will happen at some point. But he does feel to me like a player that can play at the level he is, a bit like Mohamed Salah, to be honest, in terms of the next few seasons. He's not one that I think will decline much more than what he already has. He feels like he can stay at that level for the next few seasons for me.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, obviously, you always have to be sort of wary of if there were to be another injury, but of course you can't predict that. As things stand, he certainly looks like he's capable of playing at this level for a few more years. Obviously, Liverpool are going to have this sort of contract. You don't want to call it a problem, but you've got him and Salah and Alexander-Arnold all out of contract as it stands at the end of next season. And they potentially won't want any of those guys to leave. Obviously, Salah slightly different with the interest from Saudi Arabia, which is no doubt going to continue. So there's sort of a sort of contract talks probably approaching for all three of those players. But with Van Dijk, I mean, I think he's capable of playing for the next few years at this level, and I think Liverpool certainly wouldn't want to lose him, because you can see the potential of somebody like Quansah in the long term, but of course it's going to take a long time for him to reach sort of Van Dijk's level. Obviously, Van Dijk had played various other places before he even arrived at Liverpool. So for someone like Quansah to reach that level, as an example, is going to take a very long time and going to be very difficult. So it would be madness to let Van Dijk leave. No doubt there may be a question of, well, does he keep the same salary? How long is the contract going to be? Those questions are important when you're talking about a player who's going to be, I think, is he 32 currently, something like that, probably 33 at the end of his deal. I suspect Liverpool may not want to give out, certainly not perhaps not a 3-year deal, maybe a 2-year deal. All these sorts of things come into play. But certainly, you'd think they'd want to retain him beyond the end of next season.
Yeah, I'm sure there'll be a little bit of movement on all three of those contracts, and if they are going to happen, it probably is going to happen before the end of this season. So certainly something to watch out for. Just, I suppose, linked to Van Dijk, just quickly before we move on, I've been very impressed by all three of the sort of senior options, Gomez, Konate, and Matip as well this season. Is there a number one pick, do you think, alongside Van Dijk? I think we both agree that Van Dijk is the best out of those four. But who, if you had to pick a Champions League final team tomorrow, not that it will be this season, but if you had to pick that for tomorrow, who would it be right now that you'd put next to Van Dijk?
It's a difficult one because my sort of automatic pick would be Konate, but I've just been really impressed with Matip these last few weeks when he's played. And obviously he's got that experience alongside Van Dijk. Obviously Konate does to an extent now, but obviously Matip and Van Dijk go back years. They're, Champions League winning duo ultimately. And that obviously counts for a lot. So I think probably as well as Gomez is doing, he's probably sort of fourth in line or third in that line to go with Van Dijk. And he's proven a potentially good option as sort of fullback cover and stuff like that. So I think if it were literally tomorrow, I might go Matip, but I think most people would agree Konate probably the long-term option there. But Matip has done really well this season.
Yeah, that's interesting in itself, isn't it? When you think of his contract situation at the end of this season, I suspect Liverpool might have to go out and buy a centre-back sooner rather than later. But let's move into the midfield as well, because that's obviously a position that they might need to strengthen even further. We know that Alexis McAllister has played there. They signed Wataru Endo, but were linked with Andre from Brazil through the summer. The speculation at the time was that might happen again in January. I think that is still something that Liverpool would consider potentially, but Arsenal being linked as well, which I think, to be fair, is probably a good sign, to be honest. If more clubs than just Liverpool are in for him, he's probably quite good. But from what you know of him so far, what sort of how enthusiastic would you be for Liverpool to go for Andre in the January transfer window?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of potential there. I mean, I haven't seen much of him play, but you look at the numbers and just the defensive contribution and the passing and stuff like that. I mean, I wrote a piece for .com last week, I think it was, about his passing compared to McAllister's, and based on a sort of passing model and stuff. And he came out the better of the two. And obviously he's got the better defensive numbers as well. And I think McAllister's generally been doing a good job in holding midfield. There have been the odd mistake, of course, but it's not a position that he's played in the past, at least as a sole player. There, he's played in a double pivot for Brighton and stuff. So obviously, if Andre can improve on the defensive side of the game and add something passing wise, which then also enables McAllister to go forward, I mean, it all sounds like it would work perfectly. I'm sure Arsenal and no doubt other clubs are going to be looking at him and sort of thinking the same thing. Well, if we play him there, Declan Rice or someone can play further forward, perhaps something like that. So they'll have their own sort of reasons for looking at him as well. But whilst it's not a market Liverpool have generally gone directly from, the South American market, he just feels like the sort of player they would go for. One of these sort of young players who's on the cusp of sort of moving up to the next stage of his career, probably. So he sort of ticks a lot of boxes, and it certainly feels like a plausible deal. But as I say, that there will be other clubs probably thinking the same.
Yeah, the reason that Fluminense wanted to keep him was to win the Copa Libertadores. I think the final of that is a week on Saturday. They are in it. I'm pretty sure he scored, or certainly was instrumental in the semi-final as well. So it would be quite nice to get a 22-year-old Brazilian midfielder who's got all of that experience that you can plug in. I think that would be a big boost for Liverpool in the second half of the season. And again, we've spoken a lot about contracts. A fifth contract that we're going to talk about, Thiago, it kind of makes sense if you sign Andre 6 months before the end of Thiago's contract, because we're still yet to see Thiago this season. Jurgen Klopp keeps saying it's close, but we're still not seeing him even in training at this point. It kind of feels like if Liverpool were to sign Andre in January and lose Thiago for a free at the end of the season, that probably is a timeline that you can see adding up as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's getting increasingly difficult to sort of make a case that Thiago should get a contract renewal, particularly as one of the top paid players at the club, simply because of the amount of games that he misses, as we know. And as you say, he's yet to appear this season. I think it's 8 months now since he started a game and 6 months since he made any appearance for Liverpool. And all right, you've got the summer in there, but point is, the sort of team's moved on. Obviously, the midfield has been entirely rebuilt in his absence, effectively, and that's not his fault. And that's not to say that he can't contribute over the rest of the season. But with all these young guys coming through and doing a good job, you have to wonder where's the place for Thiago. Now, if he's willing to accept, a massive pay cut, let's say, then perhaps there is a spot for him in the squad beyond this season. But he could command a huge salary, pretty much anywhere, even at his age, I suspect. And it wouldn't surprise me if there was interest in him from Saudi Arabia as well. I think there already has been, potentially, depending on what you read.
Not sure how interested he was in that, but maybe maybe a go back to Spain or something like that. I don't know. Yeah,
he may not be interested, but of course it depends what offers are on the table if Liverpool were to let him leave in the summer. We obviously don't know that, but he sort of feels more like a player that might return to Spain. I mean, Barcelona would certainly probably be interested. They sort of love snapping up high-profile players on a free and stuff like that. You could imagine a world where maybe he goes there at the end of this season. But I mean, unless he has a remarkable sort of second half of this season, which is not looking likely as things stand, I think it's very hard to see him getting another contract. So getting in, as you say, a player, if Andre were to come in January, there wouldn't be too much expectation on him for the second half of this season, but he can obviously start learning the ropes and the Liverpool and the Jurgen Klopp way of doing things and be ready to go for next season. So, a sort of passing of the torch in that sense would make a lot of sense.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we've spoken about centre-back and holding midfield then. Just to finish, are they the two next priorities, do you think, for Liverpool? Obviously, there's a little bit of a question mark over Mohamed Salah, but the rest of the squad seems to be in decent shape. Are those the next two signings that you'd like to see Liverpool make?
Yeah, I think they have to be, really, because even if Salah were to leave, sort of worst case scenario at the end of this season, there's still, several excellent young forwards who can carry the club for the next few years, and obviously guys like Doak coming through as well. And as I say, the midfield, most of the midfield rebuild looks to have gone really well. And yeah, centre back. I mean, I think that I think Klopp probably has a lot of faith in Quansah, but that's still a big ask for him to be the next guy, as it were. So yeah, defensive midfield and centre back definitely look to be the areas that need to be strengthening. And if Andre were to be signed, really next summer you're looking at centre back, and maybe there wouldn't be a need for too many other transfers. So obviously the stories and the rumours will no doubt continue. But I mean, I think it seems clear that they're the two positions in the team that need addressing at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I did say that was the last question. It was actually the second to last question. We've had a question here from Richard, who wants a prediction for Toulouse on Thursday and a prediction for Nottingham Forest on Sunday as well. So I'm going to say Liverpool win both games, but I suppose the Toulouse game is a little bit trickier to predict. We don't quite know what they are, to be honest. We don't know a great deal about them. We don't know what team Liverpool are going to play. It's a tricky one to predict, but I suspect Liverpool probably will win that one quite comfortably, and maybe the Forest one by a slightly narrower margin. But what do you reckon?
Yeah, I think that sounds about right. I mean, I think Toulouse are 10th, they're mid-table in the French league anyway, so they're not having a sort of great season. I think
they finished bottom half, didn't they, last season? But they won the French Cup, so that's how they're in it. So, right. I mean, it's tricky. I would say probably Nottingham Forest and Toulouse are not that different in terms of quality. I would say, without knowing a great deal about them, I think just broadly from where they've been, that's probably about right.
Yeah, it is hard to say. I mean, I think I'm like you. I think I would assume that Nottingham Forest is the tougher of the two games, but I say that without knowing much about Toulouse. And obviously, there is the opportunity against Toulouse for Klopp to make some changes and give some players a run out, which I'm sure he will do, which of course then means that the Liverpool aren't as strong as they might otherwise would be. But it wouldn't surprise me if the Toulouse game was somewhat similar to the game against Union SG a couple of weeks ago, whereby Liverpool win. It's not hugely exciting, but they get the job done, and everyone sort of goes home sort of broadly happy with their day out. Nottingham Forest will be a tougher test. Obviously, we've seen them this season. They won at Chelsea. They gave a good go of it at Arsenal. They were 2-0 up at Man United, although they did capitulate and lose that one. I'm actually going to the game Sunday, so obviously hoping for a big Liverpool win. But any Liverpool win would certainly be welcome.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure Liverpool will get themselves over the line in that Europa League group, but it's obviously of benefit to do that as quickly as possible, and also to tie up the top spot as well. If they can beat Toulouse home and then away a couple of weeks later, I think there's probably a decent chance that Liverpool can get first place in that group with a couple of games to spare, which would be quite nice to see as well. But yeah, thank you to Andrew for joining me. Thank you to all of you as well for submitting your questions and watching along as ever. We'll be back tomorrow and for the rest of the midweek days. What am I trying to say here? Not the weekend days, the other days, but anyway, you know the drill. We've been doing this long enough. And yeah, I think that's probably a sign that we should stop it there. So yeah, thank you to everyone for watching along this morning, and we'll catch you tomorrow.